In our living room, there is a well-worn out, simple children's book titled No David by David Shannon. The author remade a book that he made when he was a little boy. So it was illustrated with drawings of David doing all sorts of things he wasn't supposed to do. And the text consisted entirely of the words no and David. He explains that those were the only words he knew how to spell back then. So on the first page, there's a drawing, David creating a mess on the wall with his crayons. And the caption writes, David's mom always said, no, David. The next page is David trying to reach the jar of the cookies hidden on the top shelf of the cupboard. No, David. David walks into the house with muddy shoes still on, making prints on the carpet. No, David, no. During the bath time, David keeps the water running for too long until the entire bathroom floor is flooded. No, no, no. David runs out of the house naked. Come back here, David. No, David. David does his own marching band in the house using the cooking pan and the serving spoon, creating a lot of noise. David, no, be quiet. And during dinner time, David created a person figure with his fork and potatoes and peas and chicken legs. Don't play with your food, David. David opens his mouth while eating, enjoying people's reaction to his actions. That's enough, David. And it's almost bedtime, and David's favorite show is on TV. Go to your room now. Still got too much energy. David was jumping on the bed, up and down, pretending to be the superhero he just watched on that TV show. Settle down. Settle down. David picks his nose. Stop that this instant. Whenever David is in the middle of playing, Mom tells him, put your toys away. Put your toys away. David wanted to practice baseball in the living room. Not in the house, David. He didn't listen and broke the flower vase with the baseball. I said no, David. On that next page, David seems like he is getting punished. He sits in the corner chair facing the wall with some tears flowing down on his cheek. I think we can all relate to this story to some level, both from the child's perspective and also from the parent's perspective. We are living in a very strange time. When we asked if we can come back to our sanctuaries for worship, the response is somewhat similar to what David was hearing over and over. No, not yet. When we asked if we can travel for this beautiful summer for our vacation, at least to take our children out somewhere, the response is no, not yet. When we arrived at the parking lot of the grocery store to realize that we forgot our mask back home, and we're tempted, should I just run in really quickly to grab that one thing that I came here for? And we all know very well that the response is no. You cannot go into the store without a mask. We surely agree with the reasoning behind it, but we have to admit that all these no's are wearing us out. Especially as we are celebrating the value of freedom this weekend, living the life with more no's and can'ts and don'ts. It simply isn't fun. And we all know that this isn't just about the virus, but this is more about the culture that we live in. The culture in where we are spending more of our energy telling each other how they should live their lives. No, you shouldn't be hanging out with those people. No, you shouldn't be loving that people. No, you shouldn't be protesting that way. No, you shouldn't be leading like that. No, she shouldn't be doing that. No, he shouldn't be doing that. No. From all sides to all directions, we keep hearing and telling them, no. And those no's are piling up. Both by hearing and saying them, it piles up in a form of anger, frustration, and more so, if not else, as a stress. There is a verse from our scripture that immediately gravitates our attention, and that's verse 28. Many of us are familiar with this verse, and we love this verse. It says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Between all the work situations, between parenting and relationship complications with people on the side of the pandemic social distancing world that we live in, I think there's something about this verse that gives us some level of assurance and comfort, even without the context of all the other verses that we read. But today we wonder, what were they so weary about and burdened from in Jesus' time? What were they so weary and burdened about? Past 3 Sundays, we were reflecting together on the previous chapter, which is chapter 10, and where we remember talking about Jesus sending out the 12 disciples, and Jesus is giving them specific instructions, also giving them some heads up that it won't be an easy road. We remember that. It was kind of hard to preach from because it was harsh words, harsh warnings. So we need to remember that motivation towards mission in general in the background as we read the scripture reading from today. When Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest," Jesus is keeping in his mind the crowd, that crowd, right? That he is sending his disciples to go into. Go to love and share the good news with. He's remembering that crowd. The crowd, the general culture that was weary and burdened. And as I was reflecting on what kind of stress people in Jesus' day were feeling in the quest of how we can relate to these words in today's society, into our own lives today, what were they so weary about and burdened from? Perhaps the system of injustice that kept their families and children stuck in the depth of poverty. Perhaps lack of proper care for their illnesses and other challenges in personal lives. Perhaps all of the above. But what caught my attention was not in the exegetical commentaries explaining the historical context behind this gospel, But I think there is a deeper sense of being lost when we read about how they were described in earlier verses, in verses 18 and 19, where Jesus is describing them. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And I think there's an anxiety, a stress in that description. The way this generation was described was their nature of being judgmental to others. That self-centeredness, seeing everything from their own standards of how someone needs to behave and how someone needs to choose who they hang out with. And as I was reflecting on that, I knew I do exactly that, being judgmental to others, telling someone what to do and how to do it. So many times, multiple times in everyday lives. I do that all the time. I do that when I see someone's post on Facebook. I see that I do that when someone who are not following the rules, when I hear about those things. I do that about someone who are not living according to what I think they should live by. And I know that I shouldn't be judgmental to others. I know that. I know better with my head. But my egocentric nature, the egocentric nature, will always bring me back to the place that I don't want to be. That place of being judgmental. And there may be more than one reason why we tend to be like that. But one of them may be, because it's a way to prove my way is the right way. We may not express externally all the time depending on our personalities, but even internally, we do that to prove ourselves right, to prove our beliefs right, to prove our way of life as the correct way by disapproving the other. And once they are on the other side in our minds, whatever they do, they become a demon. They become a glutton and a drunkard. They become a friend of wrong people. And having to do that, having to keep proving yourself can be very stressful. I saw a post that went something along these words. I couldn't find it again, but it said, "You are not free until you no longer have to prove yourself." You are not free until you no longer have to prove yourself. To each one of us and to this generation, Jesus is telling us, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." The Message translation of the Bible does a great job in bringing these verses to our ears. It goes like this: "Get away with me, and you will recover your life. I will show you how to take a real rest. I will show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and lightly. Here are the imperatives in those few verses, from verses 28, between 28 and 30. Jesus said, "Come to me and take my yoke upon you and learn." He wasn't making a suggestion. He wasn't making a recommendation of some kind of a good way of living. But Jesus said, it's not going to just happen for you. So what we know is that we've got some work to do. We've got some spiritual work to do as we come to Jesus. We've got some taking up his yoke upon us to do as we walk with him. The story that I mentioned earlier, the child's story, David's story, makes a dramatic transition in its last 2 pages. Up to this point, he was all about, no, David, that's what all he was hearing. And at the end, we remember that he was sitting in that corner being punished with his tears on his cheeks. And then all of a sudden, the next page, Mom says, "Davy, come here," with her arms wide open. And then gives him a huge hug, saying, "Yes, David, I love you. Yes, David, I love you." In between those pages, there are no explanations for all the no's that she said to her son. There were no justifications for all the don'ts. And I have to admit, I personally do so many times too with our children, feeling bad about having to tell them something not to do, or that something that they can't do. Just 2 phrases. No justification, but 2 phrases. Come here. I love you. Perhaps because this book was a remake of something that the author wrote when he was a little child, this is what a child's experience would be in a disciplinary situation. This may be all a child can remember. Perhaps because this book is not to explain certain do's and don'ts to the children. That may not be the point. And it is not a commentary to our lives, nor a theology or philosophy, nor it is a book of doctrines. But the point of this children's book is about, perhaps in the end, it is about love. It is about love. And how quickly a child can turn from holding the grudges into running into that opened arms. So as we go into our weeks, I pray that we can remember that quickly, being able to quickly switching from your tears into running into the arms. Let us be like a child. I pray that we don't dwell in all the negativities of this world. But when we see that open arms of Jesus Christ, those open arms of Jesus Christ waiting for us, let us run to him. Let us leave behind all of our burdens of anxiety to prove ourselves correct. Run to him to surrender into the everlasting arms.